Hey guys, hey everybody.
Hey,
Welcome to an all new episode of Why Are We Like This? I am one of your hosts, Drew Grant, Video Drew, whatever you want to call me, joined as always by my great co-host, Adam Collins.
I
Hi,
am
Adam.
back. I am back, and thankful as ever to be included. Um, I I have a lot on my mind this week,
Yeah.
given the topics, but I think this particular subject is just dominating your news cycle here on your network.
I mean, when something like this happens, because this show, by the way, guys, if you don't know, this is a show about like this sort of formative pop culture that made us and our guests the way that they are, way that we are. Stuff that we loved as kids, stuff that we loved as adulthood, but that sort of had a formative experience on us. This thing that we're talking about today, for the most part, is something that is brand new. But I think B and Hannah both agree it has the roots of something that's very old and is inspired by something that we, find very familiar, which is the works of Stephen King. So I am, of course, talking about Squid Game. No, I'm talking about the new Netflix Mike Flanagan series, Midnight Mass. And we should probably say at the top of the show that there probably will be spoilers involved here. So if you haven't seen the show, maybe let's put off on watching this episode, unless you plan on seeing the show. Like if you're halfway through the show, stop now and then come back to this episode later.
Yeah, like I mean, we'll make an effort to be like, hey, we're about to get into the deep spoilers, but we can't go non-spoilery for very long with a show like this.
I mean, like it's somehow possible, but then you can't really get into like why this show is so cool. So again, guys, spoilers today. Oh, thanks, Delia. Spoilers today for Midnight Mass, and also some other fun stuff coming up. So Adam, how did you hear about Midnight Mass? Did you just see it like in pop culture zeitgeist, or?
Yeah, I mean the thing with Mike Flanagan is he's just become this incredibly exciting creator in the horror genre, both in film and television. And the thing that I think he's done so well is he presents stuff that's very familiar to us without seeming at all derivative, which is so hard to do. And I was impressed with his films, like Oculus and Gerald's Game, Hush. Like there's so much of his filmography that's great, but it was The Haunting of Hill House that knocked me out of my socks because I love that book. I love the original film, The Haunting. I love the stage play, The Haunting of Hill House. I've actually seen it on stage, and I think it's such a great like stage show to like actually use the elements of theater to scare people in a really interesting way. I'll never forget, I saw The Haunting of Hill House as a child on stage, and the way they used darkness and sound effects messed with me. It was one of the scariest things I ever experienced in my life.
Jesus.
And granted, I was younger, but it left a huge impression, and it made me obsessed with the source material. So when Jan de Bont's movie came out with Liam Neeson and Catherine Zeta-Jones, and that movie's terrible. It's horrible. So
and Owen Wilson. It also has Owen Wilson
and him, leading member of the frat pack, apparently, as I hear. Anyway, so with The Haunting of Hill House, when that show came out, it was just such a good reimagining of the source material. It brings it into the present day, and it switches around the characters and elaborates on the premise, and it was just so clever. And then Bly Manor I didn't finish, but that wasn't because it wasn't good. It was extenuating circumstances.
Okay.
So when
it's also just not as good.
When Midnight Mass was announced, I got really, really excited once I realized it was Flanagan. And since having finished it, I'm going back to Bly Manor to finally finish that.
I mean, I will say this about Bly Manor. He didn't direct every episode. I'm not sure if he wrote any of them. So it's a very different show. You can feel like the Mike Flanagan sort of inspiration from it, but I wouldn't say that it's up to that level of good. And it kind of, I think personally, I think it kind of falls apart near the end here. Interestingly, though, I feel like we left out a big one of his, which was his big studio film, or I guess not big, but Ouija: Origin of Evil, which I think was the first time that I'd seen grown-up Henry Thomas in a movie in forever. Because that came out in what, like 2000? That was like an earlier one of his that was like a mainstream one, and like it featured the little kid from E.T., like Elliot. as like a grown-up guy playing a priest. And you would think it's a Ouija prequel. It's a prequel to a movie based on a Parker Brothers game. And the first one was trash. And the second one has no right being as good as it is. And I remember seeing that and then seeing Oculus and being like, this guy's got it going on. And then he started adapting Stephen King books. And I was like, so he also did Dr. Sleep, which was phenomenal.
His biggest success, theatrically anyway.
Yeah. And then, so this, I knew this was going to be good. He has another show that's coming out called not Midnight Society. It's like Midnight Club, I think. And it has a lot of the same people, but it's about completely different subject matter. And I'm really looking forward to this. Had you watched a trailer for Midnight Mass before you saw it?
I was a bit guarded about it, as I am with trailers a lot of times these days, because trailers are so spoilery. That said, once I heard that the trailer didn't spoil a whole lot. So I finally watched it, and that initial trailer was more than enough. I was going to watch the series regardless. But I really love the setup of this show and how I wasn't sure what we were going to be getting into.
Right.
Well, wasn't sure if it was going to be supernatural, just the evil of humanity, or if it was going to be, monsters. And we end up with a mixture of a little bit of all of that, which is kind of amazing.
What's really beautiful about this, and sort of, I guess I could have seen this coming from a mile away if I had just thought about Hill House and the way he sets up things before, is I walked into this thinking this is going to be a horror movie in which the Catholic Church is the horror. And I thought that was like a pretty cool premise, because that's sort of what it made it look like from the trailer. Like a priest comes to town, and like, what would you do against an evil priest, right? Like, he would have none of the recourses that you use in like traditional horror mythology. Like, you want people to use crosses or holy water or any of this stuff, because like, he's a priest, like he can already like weaponize that iconography. And I thought, that's cool. He's taking on the Catholic Church, and like maybe just sort of like the idea of the Catholic Church and what it is and how it's like hurt people. And he's going to turn it on its head and make it into this horror film about what if church but evil, sort of like opposite, like the Warren family stuff.
Yeah.
Which is like, what if church but superheroes? So I think that I had a really interesting idea of this. And so I walked into this thinking this is an evil priest show. And Hamish Linklater, who plays the priest in this, he's a priest who comes to a small town. This is very like this is the most Stephen King-y short story, or story to ever not be written by Stephen King, in my opinion. This priest comes to a small coastal town. It's an island, actually. We're never told exactly where, but it's definitely on the East Coast somewhere, where the town industry has sort of fallen by the wayside. He comes to town and immediately starts performing these sort of miracles, taking the place of an older priest who had gone to Jerusalem on a trip and then sort of disappeared. And into this fray walks a young man played by Zach Gelford named Riley Flynn, which is a very cool name. I feel like that's the name of a Tangled character, but isn't that literally the name of the character from Tangled?
He calls himself Flynn.
He calls himself Flynn. That's right.
Yeah.
So he comes in. He has murdered somebody accidentally during a drunk driving incident that we see very early in the film or in the show.
That's how it opens. Yeah.
Yeah, how it opens. Every night when he goes to sleep, he sees the image of the woman who he hit, a very young woman, and it's like we can see her eye reflecting the red and blue of the police light. And
she specifically, what's haunting about it is she has shards of mirror glass in her face that reflect the lights of the police cars and the ambulance and everything, and it is just so eerie. It is a Mike Flanagan staple, I think. That is like, if I had to pick one trademark of Flanagan, just visual trademark, it's like reflective eyes. Or one of the most effective things in Bly Manor was the departed husband ghost with the glasses. I found that very unsettling.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it happens in every single one of his movies that somebody has a weird eye thing. And I'm not going to go through the whole plot, but basically that's just a setup. It's a small town. You meet everybody in the little coastal town. There's his parents. Everyone's super religious. Everyone's super religious Catholic, although the word Catholic is never used in this show. I'm pretty sure
they're very specific about it. I didn't feel like they were walking on eggshells, but they weren't there to indict the Catholic Church. No. Like that wasn't like
it's coded Catholic Church. There's a Monsignor and a priest and the whole thing. Yeah.
Like they're there to have a conversation about religion, which we'll get into, but I don't feel like it was a black and white, like
No,
Christianity's evil. That's not what it was about for me at all.
No, not at all. And by the way, that's not what even the story's about, but it sort of backdoors it. Like it starts out and you're like, who is this priest? He's so shady. The other woman who's associated with the church, this woman, Bev. Oh, I want to read this super chat. Yeah, I'm off work in time to watch this live. Flynn's real name entangled is Eugene. Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Love you, VideoDrew and Adam.
Thank you, Brandon. That's my former team's partner from the fan leagues, Brandon.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Good man. And thanks for tuning in, buddy. Glad you're off work. Relax. Enjoy yourself.
Yes. And guys, by the way, again, this is sort of spoilers. We'll tell you when we're getting really spoilery, but this is sort of spoilers generalized right now from
We're here to get into it about Midnight Mass because VideoDrew has feelings. I have feelings. We need to get through this.
So what was surprising to me is by episode 3, I'm like, this priest cannot be the bad guy because he's doing too many coded things that do not read as a totalitarian religious figure. He's like empathetic. He says he doesn't have any answers whenever people like ask him, like, what does God want? He's like, I don't know. Like, he's you can tell he has like a searching kind of soul. Like he has a secret, but like what that secret is seems very, if not benign, then like well-intentioned. And so I thought maybe this guy's just misguided. Maybe it's like he's working for the devil and thinks he's working for God or something like that. Like he's some sort of holy warrior who got like lost his way. And it's just, there's a sheriff in town who's played by Raul Cowley in the biggest daddy role that I've ever seen. He's so good, but also such a daddy. And
he's one of the best parts of Bly Manor too. But like he's such a talented fellow and great Twitter follow. Oh God.
Yeah. I was gonna say his tweets are the best. His tweets specifically about this show are the best because he's supposed to be playing a Muslim character. He's the Muslim sheriff of this Catholic or very Christian community. And somebody said like, oh, this is great, but I wish you'd found a Muslim actor to play this character instead of like a Hindu. And somebody else wrote, I guess Raul wrote, actually I'm agnostic. And somebody else tweeted back at him being like, but Indian equal Hindu. You like Hindu or something like that. And he goes like, sadly, I don't. And it was very funny.
Yeah. And he's, like implication, like read up on our history a little bit too.
I mean, also like you don't have to, we don't cast on religious lines. That would start to be like very weird.
No. And the thing is he delivered a great performance. And the thing I love about his character and his son is just the way, this conflict of faith within the community is brought into the forefront. And it goes certain ways you'd expect and other ways you don't. And I think what's important is there's one scene in particular that I love where he and Bev?
Yes. Oh my God, it's one of the best scenes.
Yeah, Bev, the matriarchs, for a lack of better terms, of the island, who's devoutly religious. She's basically Marcia Gay Harden from The Mist times 10.
Oh man, she's Kathy Bates in Misery meets Dolores Umbridge meets Nurse Ratched. Like immediately how she's coded. She is like she's the lawful evil. Like on the Venn diagram, like she is literally all rules, all restrictions, and like dogmatic, like certainty that hers is like the righteous path. Yeah.
And that scene where, so just a little bit of context. First and foremost, I guess we're going to start getting into spoilers. We have to have a discussion in earnest about this show. So sure. I saw King's Portal in the chat, hasn't seen the show yet.
And Jesse.
Yeah.
I want to speak real quick what we can sum up from the trailers, which is, before we get into the spoilers, is the thing we're about to talk about, I think, from this scene, is just that the priest performs what appears to be a miracle. He's able to make a woman or a young woman who cannot walk, he can just make her walk. He just gets her to walk in sort of not even like a revival church kind of thing, because again, I'm Jewish, so I don't know exactly how these things are coded, but like it's very much like a quieter kind of moment where he's trying to give her the sacrament, and he kind of makes her get up and come to him, and everyone's like, what are you doing? Like, you can't do that. It's just so good. So go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, not at all. But basically, just because we're going to move ahead with the conversation, for anyone who hasn't seen the show, please come back to us if you absolutely don't want spoilers. And for my part, I'll even tweet out again to let people know when it's safe. But like, this show, for those of you who have seen it, what I think the best moments are, there are all these scary moments and all these fantastical moments that are quite memorable. But the reason Flanagan's good at what he does is because he focuses on these smaller moments and he lingers on them. And
real talky. This is a real talky horror show.
Oh yeah. And the scene that we're referring to is when Sheriff Hassan, he finds that his son's brought home a Bible from school. And he and his son are Muslim, and he's upset with this fairly because it's a public school. And so he ends up they have a meeting at school where they discuss why the Bible was sent home. And it's this really substantive, thoughtful discussion or really declaration from him about why he believes in Islam and why it's important to him. And after a period of explaining himself, Bev says, I don't feel it's appropriate for you to explain this here. And he says, exactly. And it's just, it was an incredibly effective moment in this otherwise really wild show, this really wild story where even a moment like that really finds its room to breathe. And
sorry, go ahead.
No. I'd more or less made my point.
Well, what I think is so great about that scene is had he stopped there, the argument would have been won on his side. But he continues to talk a little bit and gives her this opening saying, if I started quoting the Quran and Cloud started bringing home Quran, your kids would have a shit fit or you would have a shit fit if your kids started bringing home the Quran. Yeah. And what's so subtle and great about Mike Flanagan is that he kind of gives people the ability to talk as real people would make arguments. No one really talks the way they do in books and movies when it's just somebody makes a declarative statement that sums up their entire personality, and then everyone just sits there with it because they've made the statement. It's no, people have comebacks and retorts, and whether those retorts are in good faith or not is a different story. Because Bev's thing is she goes, I'm so sad that you would think that of me. Of course I'd be happy if our kids came home with the Quran. She doesn't have a kid. She goes, but if there's anything appropriate in it, to quote, which there is not that much of, but to be fair, the Old Testament also has a lot of bad stuff. She's making all these very sane, very sensible arguments that are completely in bad faith. And that to me is what's so scary about people like her and about that kind of, coming to you with these straw dog arguments thing. Of course she wouldn't be happy if the kids came home with the Quran. She doesn't even have any kids. This lady is we find out by the end, what kind of a howling racist she really is. But everyone in town is sort of that kind of nice racist where they don't have to actually ever have to confront their racism or their beliefs about other cultures. Their sheriff is Muslim and they keep calling him Sharif. I think that's maybe his first name, but it's their way of saying sheriff. It's a little bit of a coded dig at him. And I think, by the end of, what I love about this story is, before we get into the big reveal, is that it is the best Stephen King books, and that it's always about a town that starts out as disparate group of people who all have disparate views on things, who by the end, the real horror is the hive mind mentality that they kind of succumb to. So it's the Tommy Knockers, it's Needful Things, it's any of his stories.
Salem's Lot.
Obviously. Yeah. So it's a lot of these stories where people start out as disparate groups under the dome, but then sort of fall prey to this groupthink ideology that's very, very dangerous and very toxic. And what's sad about it and what's really horrifying about it is you start the stories always with the sense that each person has their own belief system and is somewhere on the spectrum of moral or immoral, but they're not bad people. They're just people. It's like COVID. It's whatever forces are external to you pressing down on you in a community can make you do horrible things. And no one's kind of immune to it.
For sure. And Riley was a character that really resonated with me because while I haven't experienced the debilitating tragedy that he does at the beginning of the show, the idea of coming back to your family and trying to find your role in a place that's familiar, but you don't feel like you fit into. Yeah. Speaking for myself, I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm not a religious person, but I grew up in a religious household. So I'm very familiar with the Bible, Christian teachings. I understood every single reference made in this show.
Oh, sorry, that's the doggy. Yeah.
Well, that's par for the course in the video studio with those dogs. Ooh. Sorry,
yeah,
I'm just yeah.
Whoa, that's intense because this has a very big Jonestown bit at the end.
And we'll get to that. That's fascinating, Tim.
That's fascinating, Tim. Whoa.
So the reason I identify with Riley is he comes back and he's a man who is no longer rooted in faith for a lot of reasons. But regardless of his reasons, the thing I liked about the way his character was written is he questions faith and he has issues with the teachings of Christianity specifically, which he articulates many times. But at the same time, I never get the impression that he's mad at his family for having the religion that they do.
And he's not disrespectful.
And he understands what faith does for people when it works for them. And I think that's what this show does really well. Mike Flanagan's working through a lot of things here, but he's not making some obvious, blatant indictment of religion as a whole. He's having a conversation between characters who are of different religions or no religion. And all the while things are happening that strain credulity, like with what we know about science throughout the whole thing. And I mean, we really have to get to the crux of this show.
I want to say two more things before we get to it, in case anyone's hasn't left yet, but still is interested in hearing this, which is I think the show's saying a couple things, and it is having a conversation in the sense that some of the scenes are just long shots of characters, two-handers, where characters are just talking back and forth, having dialectical conversations about religion, about death, about what happens when you die, and they take a break from the action entirely. You can fast forward the show and watch scene, a bunch of cuts right in a row, and then there'll be a 20-minute segment of people just sitting across from each other. So Riley's in AA. One of the things I thought was the Rosetta Stone for me about this series was the conversation Riley has when they started having AA on the island, and it's just him.
I love all the AA scenes. Love them.
So good. So the pastor, I'm not sure if it's him or the priest, who says that alcohol isn't good or bad. It's just a tool. It's just a tool like anything else. It has no moral, inherentness. It's whatever you do with it that makes it what it is. So it's your relationship to it that makes it toxic. So his the boys Riley's relationship to alcohol was bad, had a bad connotation, but it isn't necessarily just a bad thing in and of itself. It's just a tool. And I think that's what it is with religion in this. I think that's what they're trying to say about religion. Religion isn't good or bad. It's just what people do with it that makes it can be really, really uplifting and empowering, and can bring a community together, can literally be communion, or it can be a force of great violence and prejudice and small-mindedness and create a lot of horror in this world. And so I thought that was such a beautiful needle to thread. What are you guys eating? I think we can get into it now. So there is something supernatural at play here. There's a lot about death in this show, just like Haunting of Hill House, where I thought the idea of death was very cool, but ultimately kind of a little bit shallow, almost really was he implying that everyone after they die gets to Beetlejuice and live in a house forever, with their dead relatives, and it's both terrifying but also the best, and it's the best outcome, but also not something you're supposed to want.
The final episode of Hill House didn't quite land for me, but I still liked the show overall. And again, Bly Manor, for me, the jury's still out, but what I will say with Midnight Mass is I do think this show stuck the landing.
This show stuck the landing super hard. It had 3 beautiful speeches about death that hit me in ways that I don't even know. Again, this can go without the spoilers, but Riley has a conversation with the woman he likes, played by Katie Siegel, who is Mike Flanagan's wife in real life.
Such a talent. She's so good.
She's so great. They're just sitting across from each other. She has lost a baby through some extraordinary means. She's pregnant, and then suddenly she's not pregnant anymore. Can't figure out what happened. And she's distraught, and he's not. And she asks, "What do you think happens to you when you die? When you're dying, I guess maybe." No, or I guess she asks, "What happens to you when you die?" And he proceeds to give this 10-minute monologue about how, and it's beautiful, but it's his atheist version of or maybe agnostic. Like, I think it's just like his version of like, well, I can't tell you anything about the afterlife, but here's like what I think happens to your physical self when you die. Your body releases a bunch of DMT and you go to sleep in this dream. And the dream is so intense and so vivid because it's all your body just releasing all the chemical at once. That it's basically like one long like trip and you're just asleep and it lasts forever. And then all the things that make you up and like all the things that are they're living on your skin that have made you up your entire life without you knowing it, those things like are still there and they keep on living. And like the rest of you goes back to being organic matter and like, but you don't fully go away because you were never really made up of what you think you're made up of. And it's really beautiful. I'm kind of paraphrasing it. And so I was already a sobbing wreck by the time that speech ends. And then
this show made me cry a ton.
Yeah, this show made me cry a ton.
Yeah.
She goes, and I'm not sure if I can even sum up what she says, like she thinks happens after you die, but it's like so sad and beautiful. And then she gets a speech near the end where she sums up another version, another iteration of what she thinks happens while she is dying. And it's not just a tearjerker. It's one of those things that makes you feel like less alone in the world. Because I think,
right.
Yeah, good.
Because even when you're speaking in scientific terms, which Riley and Aaron, her character, they both do it at different points of the series. They talk about the chemical breakdown that translates to the end of life. And even when you're speaking in those clinical terms, the way they put it, the perspective and the context they put on what it means to be part of the cosmos, what it means to be a pile of neutrons, electrons, and protons, like
to be one with the world, to be one, to be that spirit that you always were.
It taps into something that I think we all identify with, whether we're religious or not, and it's just some idea of balance and unity in terms of energy at the very least. And I think this show nails that.
Well, and I think also what it hits on when she's talking about her version of death, it's like, well, she thinks her baby like just was sent down by God to have a nice dream, and like it was never supposed to wake up. She was she thinks the baby was a she, so it's like she thinks that like the baby was just there to have a dream from God and then be brought back up and sort of be surrounded by her grandparents and her friends and relatives, and then God speaks her name, and then she opens her eyes for the first time. It's this beautiful, like it's getting choked up thinking about it. It's this beautiful idea, and like. The guy who doesn't believe in God doesn't like laugh and be like, that's like a ridiculous thing to believe. That's a fairy tale. He's like, I really hope that's true. And it's like,
right
at the end, when she is dying, she has this one thing about like, the energy and stuff. But she says this really interesting line, I think, where she's like, I think it's something to the effect of, I was so worried about death. I've been so scared, but like, how did I forget that we are all the same, that I am everything, that, sort of like, that I was always this. And she goes, but I will forget again, which is also like a very Hindu idea of like reincarnation, but also that like this is the dream. So that living is actually the dream that like God or this presence or whatever is having via each of us. It's a really profound thing that I don't think you get across in a lot of like television shows or movies in general. But
exactly. I feel like this show could like play very well with someone who's Christian, Muslim, or any religion as it would with an atheist.
Yeah,
and
I think as long as you're open-minded,
threading that needle is so difficult, and that you can only do it if you're earnest. And Flanagan has that in spades. He's so genuine in his storytelling.
I was comparing this a little bit to *Malignant* because I think both him and James Wan are sincere, like directors, in the sense that they are not taking like their stuff and doing some meta ironic wink at it. I mean. I think we can get into it. Like one word that is never said over the course of this entire show. There's a couple words that aren't said. Catholic isn't said. The devil isn't mentioned. I think sin is mentioned once or twice, but like evil is never brought up. It's only the other side of like God that's brought up. And more specifically, the word vampire is never brought up in this entire show, even though what's really happening is vampires.
Effective.
Yeah.
And yeah, guys, that's, like if you've been with us this long, hopefully you've seen the series, but it's a vampire story and that's very important. But it is the most refreshing take I've seen on vampire mythology in a very long time. And honestly, 30 Days of Night, I give it a lot of credit because that movie, I think, is what it does well is that movie made vampires scary for me for the first time in a long time. And I found the vampires in that film to be very unsettling. And I found the threat to be very palpable in that film.
Yeah.
And this does that less bombastically. It's much more gradual. It's very, very
it's much more spiritual.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual threat.
But what I think that film has in common with this and what they both get right is that it actually examines the weight of what it would be like if these things were real and how terrifying that would be.
Well, and like, I think specifically real in the way that like the zombies on The Walking Dead are real, which is to say, in this reality, in this version of reality, they don't have vampire culture. They don't have Bram Stoker. Dracula isn't a thing. So
I like that in The Walking Dead. I like that they don't say zombies. That makes me happy.
Right. And they've never seen a zombie film. Like George Romero doesn't exist. Like, it's just that you have to take that as you start realizing that's like sort of the deal here, because it gets to a certain point where they're like, the blood is burning up in the daylight. I can't go outside. Like, this is spreading through town like a virus and everyone's biting each other's neck. Wonder what's going on. And you're just waiting for someone to be like, it's a fucking zombie thing. I mean, it's a vampire thing or a zombie thing. But no one says that because it's like this very sincere attempt to sort of rebuild the mythology of it and sort of bring back the idea of like, because right now what we have is a culture where the moment you bring up zombies or vampires or anything in a movie, the characters immediately have to say, like this show or this movie, or that, they have to sort of frame it in reference to what we know about today. And it's really refreshing to have this alternative universe, which only sees the vampires through a religious angle. So they do see them as like angels, or this priest has interpreted what I think we would say is a vampire to be an angel, if not the angel that turned Jesus Christ possibly into a vampire. And
the thing is, that's what the show gets into so well, because even though it's an uncomfortable comparison for a lot of people, there is an undeniable link between the story of Christ and the mythology of vampires. It's undeniable. So it only makes sense to actually, put those two things together and actually examine what those correlations mean. And Dracula 2000 didn't quite nail it, making Dracula and Judas the same person. I think that was a little silly. But what I love about this is, for so many years, we assume, like, we're used to Christianity being the antidote to vampirism,
everything evil.
Yeah.
Like, it's the Catholic Church. Not even just Christianism, it's the Catholic Church.
Right.
Specifically is what has the power.
But like, you can weaponize, holy water and wafers and all this stuff. And
that's all Catholic,
and that is tossed out the window with this. This looks at it like, no, when you turn, it's not a simple matter of just wanting to drink blood and kill people. You're still you. And it's a matter of how much do you still want to be you, and how much do you want to embrace what your needs are now. And I love the dichotomy of these characters who are devoutly religious, trying to square their religion with this metamorphosis they're going through. And it is it's such a fair argument from a religious perspective to say, if I'm being turned into an immortal, why is that not a divine act? Why is that not a miracle? Why do we frame this as an evil demonic thing when this is the eternal life that we supposedly are looking for?
Well, and again, this is like a very interesting comparison, but like the devil, for a town like that is like this, you would think the devil is being brought up a lot, but it's almost like, it almost had this Judaic feel where it's like, we only talk about God and like what God's doing for us and what we're doing for God. We never talk about a relationship with a devil. I'm not sure if Judaism believes there's the devil. I don't think we do. I think that's
there's no hell in Judaism.
There's no hell. And our version of heaven is very much like what K.B. Siegel is describing at the end of the thing, where it's like your self evaporates, but like your essence continues to rise. And like, I think it's the better, more like true life you lived with Adonai, like the more of you get to retain almost as you sort of level up in places of heaven, or like the kingdom of heaven or whatever. But it's not like you walking around being like, oh, hey, what's up? There's my ex, there's my kid, blah, blah. It's like your sort of sense of who you were, I guess, remains. But what's beautiful about this, I think, is just without that idea of the evil, about what the sinning is, it's all just really about, right, it's about rationalizing what you're doing in terms of God wants this, and I'm doing what God wants. It's sort of like those the January 6th rioters who were like taking the papers and being like, I think Ted Cruz would want us to take this, and this woman, Bev, has like a scripture line for everything, like everything that could possibly happen. She's like, well, there's this line in the scripture that's like, God, was like, Jesus, have them eat your bones and make your bread, or whatever Jesus did, like drink my blood or whatever. So she's got like all this rationalization. And one of my favorite scenes in this show is when she comes in and the priest has accidentally sort of murdered and then drank the blood of the local town drunk. And he's like sitting in a corner. He doesn't know what's happening to him because he is actually, let's be clear, he is the old priest from that they've been waiting for to come home. He was rejuvenated when he was bit, and not quite turned, but he was bit and rejuvenated by a vampire. So that's another thing they can do, is remake the vampire lore. In this, if you are not dead, then you don't become a vampire. You just get restored to your full health if you drink vampire blood.
Well, and that's what I thought was very clever about this, was the idea of inoculating people through the sacrament of communion was brilliant. I just that's a stroke of genius that I just can't believe hasn't happened until now. And it's been right there in front of us for decades. And
only 1 second, let me grab her.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. Hello, dogs. Hello. But did they watch Midnight Mass with you guys?
They did.
They must have. They're still processing a lot as well.
Right. I mean, again, so this is the stuff that like hits a little bit different for me because I'm Jewish. So I've always thought eating the sacrament and drinking the wine sounded like really creepy and goth. Like I remember going to a Catholic summer camp and I was like, oh, you guys do that? I was like, that's like dark. Like you're drinking blood. And like we have Passover, which is like we take the wine and we put our fingers in it and recite the 10 plagues, which end with death of a firstborn and blood and all this stuff. And it's very like ritualistic. But at no point do we have this communion transference thing where we're like, no, this is supposed to be like the body of our Lord and Savior that we're consuming like a zombie, and then we're drinking his blood like a literal vampire.
Well, my takeaway from this is the overall implication is that Jesus himself could quite possibly have been the vampire, in a lot of ways.
By one, right? Because they say that they found him in the road to Damascus. Yeah.
But I don't think necessarily that means vampires are inherently the most evil thing that ever existed, because there are characters in this who decide how to handle their vampirism in very moral ways.
And also, like the way the guy keeps describing it is, it's an angel, like it's a savior. It bit him and it almost killed him, but then it rejuvenated him from being a 99-year-old man with dementia. He woke up the next morning in the peak of health at like 40 years old as Hamish Linklater. And he was able to go out in the sun. We know he's not a vampire then, because he's literally the first thing he does is go out into the sun.
Yeah, you have to die first.
Right. So what we're told here is the vampire itself almost doesn't have like a good or evil quality, just like religion, just like alcohol. The vampire is just a tool. So like the vampire, he's been slipping the vampire's blood into the communion wine. So people have been drinking from it and getting healthier, getting younger, getting like that's how the miracles are occurring. The woman can walk again. That's also how the tragedy of the woman miscarrying into never having been pregnant in the first place happens. So again, it's like this divine or like, otherworldly interference is causing both good and terrible things, like awesome and terrifying implications. The problem is that, and I think in the weakest part of the show, because it's just really not explained that well, but it's like given enough clues that you're like, what was this supposed to mean? The priest is poisoned and dies at one point. And then when he comes back, he is a vampire, which is to say he can't go out in the light. He hungers for blood, and things just start going kind of haywire until after that point, until it ends in like a Jim Jones style mass sort of drinking of the poisoned wine. So everyone can come back as a vampire. And that's not great. Because like you said, go ahead.
I think what I liked about that, one thing I've always liked about Walking Dead, both the show and the comics, is I like the simple idea that everyone's infected and they come back, and regardless of how they die. And I felt like this built upon that in a very interesting way, where we're so used to vampires being like, they have progenies, they have ones they select, like it's an exclusive club.
Right.
And the thing I love about this is the vampire, the angel, the one who looks like Nosferatu with wings.
Yeah.
Badass character design. Love it.
Yeah.
I
up angel.
Yeah. He looks like the classic drawings of the fallen angels and all this stuff. It's very, very haunting imagery. Loved it.
And he's, let's be clear, I'm not sure ever at any point how sentient or like how aware he is of like what he's doing.
He's so animalistic. Yeah.
He's just working off instinct, except when the priest starts calling him angel and praying to God as he's dying. And then the thing turns around and gives him its blood. So it does respond to things. Also, that final scene where he's saying, everyone drink this poison wine. And he's like, look upon you, there's an angel. And you just see the creature and it's wearing all the high priest robe stuff. And it just saunters in like to the pulpit and just puts its hands out and its wings come out. And you're like,
every time they cut to that thing.
Yeah.
And they do that music cue where it's just like, I'm like, nope. Yeah,
so good.
And Flanagan's obsession with eyes, is so effective in this. And I just, if anyone's triggered by the idea of eyes in the darkness, the show's gonna fuck you up.
Yes, I will say that the show is not. I don't think the show's trying to be that scary. It has like I think 2 or 3 jump scares, and the rest of it is just straight up meditation on religion and death.
For me, it's the stuff that lingers. Yeah, it wasn't jump scares at all.
It's definitely not Haunting of Hill House where there's like stuff hidden in the background. Like there isn't. Like this is just this show is exactly what it's purporting to be, which is like just sort of like the priest himself who never takes the picture of his younger self back from the 20s off of his wall in the rectory. So everyone who walks into the rectory is like, hey, that guy looks a lot like you. He's not like trying to hide it that much. He's really not. He's almost like he's not above board because he isn't telling everyone what's going on because he doesn't think that they'll accept it like immediately. He kind of has to perform these miracles and show them what the blood's effect will do. And in his mind, it's not that different from drinking Jesus's blood. He's drinking an angel's blood. Like, what's the difference? Like, they're doing what they said they were going to do when they drank the communion wine in the first place.
Yeah, and I see, Claudia's comment here. I completely agree. For the most part, I was raised in a Methodist church, and the weird thing about that is, you're supposedly not supposed to drink when you're a Methodist. But I know very few Methodists, at least from my upbringing, who didn't drink. That said,
communion?
So the communion, there's still communion, but the wine is literal grape juice.
Okay.
It's very, very cute.
We do that too.
Yeah, but like at the same time, like I remember when I went to a Catholic service for the first time in my life when I was like a child. I was like 9, and I was used to Methodist communion, and I took Catholic communion. It was at a funeral, and I just remember I was like, well, I don't want to be disrespectful, so I took communion, and it was real wine, and I gagged, and I just wasn't prepared for it.
Are you allowed to do that? I thought like only Catholics can take communion.
And then they let me take communion at that funeral.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
I mean that specifically, I was a child. It was my grandfather's funeral. It was a long time ago. And I just don't think there were a lot of rules in place at the time. I think they were just like, let's roll them through the funeral.
Do you think that this movie is sort of like a nice, or like not an anecdote, but like another way to look at the prism of what is brought up in like movies like Hereditary or like The Exorcist, where movies that are just about the ritual or rituals that people do, like the either Black Mass or like Catholic Mass. Like this is a show that's called Midnight Mass very clearly because once he's turned into a vampire, he starts holding the masses at midnight. And Riley gets turned into a vampire in this really horrifying and tragic, it meets a tragic end, beautiful but tragic end. But what he sees and what we see everyone seeing once they are turned into a vampire is very much not religious one way or another. It is very much what he's describing with the DMT trip. Like they see halos around like the lights, and they hear like they're clearly like tripping balls and interpreting that as a religious experience. which I thought was like such a good like mic drop, because that's having your cake and eating it too. It's saying like, what is the difference between a flood of chemicals in your body and divine, interference or divine intervention? It's so good that like you were able to see it his way, which is like, no, this is crazy. This is like insane. What my body's doing right now is like dying or like being dead and just experiencing death continuously. And everyone else is like, this is the Lord.
Well, I think what's so important about the way they frame the story, especially with regard to the primary vampire, the patient zero, if you will, the angel, as they call it.
Yeah.
It is such an animal, and all of these people are trying to ascribe meaning to it. And it's just an example that even with something as fantastic as vampirism, it's still like when you take it down to its most basic elements, even the idea that we could be partially immortal because we technically won't die as long as we stay out of the sunlight,
and that thing doesn't die.
Yeah, it's amazing to like look at this particular story and realize, okay, there is this ageless creature that started all of this small community turning into vampires, but it doesn't give a shit.
No,
it doesn't. It has no investment. It just wants to eat.
Yeah,
and all these people are trying to find meaning in it.
I mean, because it does willingly give its blood to, like, at times it seems to understand what the priest is saying, or it seems to react. Like, that's the only time it seems.
But it's a virus. Like that thing acts like a virus more than a sentient being to me.
But like the way that it reacts when he starts saying the Lord's Prayer and he calls it an angel is very clearly like a recognition moment. And they say that he was like found the cave on the road to Damascus. It's like this whole thing that I think is supposed to ascribe that whether or not this is an angel, it is definitely what people in the Bible were talking about when they were talking about angels. That's why they keep saying in the Bible how scared everyone was when they saw angels, because they were these giant, monstrous looking things with wings that could sort of interact with you or sort of maybe understood what you were doing when you were praying, and sort of like could relate to you on a little bit higher functioning level. Like it could put on clothes. It showed up in the church and was like, put its arms out. It opened up its veins and put it in the glass. Like it understood some basic human concepts, but it doesn't function on like what we think of as like a Dracula or like somebody who's trying to sigh or anything. It's not trying to do anything. It is just like a beast. It is like has no good or bad. It's just like something to be respected, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What was strange to me, though, there's a couple of things here that I do want to say that it's beautiful and I love the story. I feel like there's a little bit of a missed connection here about like how the priest ends up dying, because we're given this very clear through line early on that Bev has poisoned the town drunk's dog. We see it's like pretty subtle, but we see her dropping a hot dog right in front of the dog. The next cut to away, the next thing we know, the dog is foaming at the mouth, bleeding up blood, and rolls over, and its eyes are red, and it's dead. And then we see her putting away poison later, and the sheriff comes to confront her, and she's like, anyone could have done it. Everyone has access to here. As soon as the priest performs his first miracle, he starts vomiting up blood and gets progressively sicker, but like in like small ways. And then like 2 days later, she's holding a meeting at the rectory. He just shows up stumbling out of nowhere and just vomits up blood and like dies. And when he comes back from the dead, that's when he's like allergic to sunlight, which is like an interesting thing because it creates a distinction between the people who are just getting healthier and who could have maybe just lived forever without being vampiric and without having those urges, which is what the temptation is, which I think he is like struggling with. And what the priest spends a lot of time being like, well, can it be evil if it was given to me this divine way? Maybe that means the urges themselves are pure. Mm-hmm. But we definitely see that people do not have the vampire thing. They're just getting healthier and stronger when they drink the vampire's blood. But like, what killed him?
I know, like, it definitely, you can't ignore the parallel with the dog. I do think poison had something to do with it.
And at the end of the year, poisons everyone in town. Like, they poison everyone the same way.
They do. It's going to be such a fascinating show to rewatch. I cannot wait. That's what Flanagan does well, in my opinion, with these series specifically, is when you finish it, going back to the beginning is a treat because you can pay attention to all these different things that you know now. And That's a bit of a question mark to me right now, how he technically died.
Because it was her, but if you were a detective, you would have to release her because there is no motive and there is no opportunity, because we see the poison works very fast. Like, as soon as you take it, seconds later, you are foaming at the mouth and dying. So, like, we see her talking to people before he walks in, stumbling in and vomiting up blood and dies. So, like, she had no motive to do it because she loved the priest, and she had no opportunity to do it. But yet she clearly did it. And then I feel like it's just like a weird way that he wanted to like have his cake and eat it too, with this storyline where the priest has to die. So he dies in this mysterious way. And then you get so distracted by the vampire stuff, you never really circle back to like what happened there.
Mm-hmm. There were a couple things in the final episode that I can appreciate the dramatic impact of certain revelations.
So to speak.
Yeah, thus the name of the episode. Mm-hmm. But I feel like those could have been layered in more going into that. Honestly, I can only really nitpick this series because overall I felt it was one of Flanagan's best things he's done. Like, I just...
Oh, yeah, this is by far the best thing he's done.
The emotional impact I felt from this, it really floored me. And that's what I love. People who aren't as into horror as us, and some people watching this show don't understand it as much, but the best horror content is the horror content that, at least for me, gets me emotionally invested. And this really won me over to the characters. And what's special about him is he does these very specific things that make me identify with characters in nostalgic ways. I was looking at Riley's mother this entire time and seeing Diane Weiss from The Lost Boys. But she was still her own character.
Yeah, it's very like homage, just like James Wan. It's very homage-y without being referential, if that makes sense. Like, it's very much like sort of a feeling, like Stranger Things is more of like a feeling of evoking a certain thing more than it is the thing itself.
It's very No, sorry.
She reminded me of the mom from Poltergeist and what's her name? Is it Dee Williams? No.
Jo Beth Williams.
Jo Beth Williams. Yeah, she reminded me of her. I mean, she's a great character because she's played almost like one note the parents are played almost to a T, like one note this entire time. And then at the end, they are given this depth and nuance to the characters where it's like Henry Thomas is the dad and he's like, really gruff and like doesn't seem to love his kid, or like really resents his kid a lot for having to go to prison.
I love his little mustache in this show.
Yeah,
I really do.
And the mom is just one of these like, over talkative, like everything's fine. Here's like what's going on in town, but like everything's fine kind of moms. Jesus loves you, everything's fine. And then at the end, they are both given such, after their son is dead, and we continue seeing them as characters, especially after the father turns into a vampire. They're given such range and nuance. And she's the one, I think, who ultimately stands up to Bev in the most compelling way by asking, why does it scare you so much that Jesus, or like God, that would love everyone the way that he loves you? Like, why is that so scary to you? And it's so brilliant because at that point she's lost her kid. Well, she has the other son, but like she's lost her kid. She's got nothing left of that everything's fine veneer. And there is a depth to her that I feel like is so easy to dismiss. And they give that almost like to every single character in the show.
They really do. And look, this show got really hyped. When it released a little over a week ago. I saw all the buzz, and I wasn't in a position to watch it yet. But once I finally got time, I started it and I finished it in three and a half days, 7 episodes. So most of you who are watching have probably seen it in its entirety, and if we've spoiled it for you, you're a great sport. It's still worth seeing.
It's still worth seeing.
Promise. Yeah.
Because again, he's not really trying to hide the ball. Like he reveals this pretty much halfway through, and then it's just about the dialectic conversation that we're having about it.
I just have to bring up Salem's Lot again because that's one of the more obvious parallels. Stephen King himself has been incredibly vocal about how he thinks this series is fantastic, and that makes sense. He and Flanagan are tight.
They're super tight.
But
he trusts them to do the sequel, The Shining. Consider how tight they are.
Yeah, but the thing I love about it is I thought of Salem's Lot the entire time I was watching this. And over the past year, I've revisited Salem's Lot. I reread the book, revisited the miniseries, the original miniseries, not the Rob Lowe, Donald Sutherland one.
Wait, but they have a Rob Lowe mini? Oh yeah, that's right. They did make it.
Yeah, they did. So they remade it, and I need to go back to that miniseries because it's Rob Lowe, and then they bring back Donald Sutherland and Rutger Hauer are both in it. So that's their second vampire movie after the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is funny.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I've never seen either Salem's Lot. I've read the book. I have to
dig
say, I'd be remiss of saying if the book was one of my favorites. It's not. I feel like the Tommyknockers does the same kind of story, but
Tommyknockers is great because it's extra weird. It's the Lovecraftian vampire story. It's aliens as vampires. That's yes. Kind of the story.
Well, both of them have that sense of the town just turning into this other entity, everyone in town collectively turning into something. And what's really clever about it is the way that it's mundane, not in the way that it's great and powerful and awe-inspiring, but in the way that the mayor has to tuck his new vestigial tail into his pants and be well, a person can get used to anything if you give them long enough, that kind of idea. Or everyone just kind of switching their schedule around. So now the stores are open at night because everyone's kind of turned into a vampire.
And in the Tommyknockers,
so good.
In the Tommyknockers, they're all they all become nuclear physicists overnight, but the only way they can make things work is with AA batteries. That's the caveat. It's so hilarious.
They're brilliant all of a sudden, but they're still kind of backwoods, I don't want to say hillbillies, but they're sort of people that know how to do stuff with their hands. So even though they suddenly have the information material of someone who's a nuclear physicist, they're really only able to game things out so far. And and there's a moment in Tommyknockers where a woman thinks that Jesus Christ is talking to her and telling her to build a bomb to kill her husband. And it's just such a great thing because she's talking to Jesus on the wall and she has this moment of realization where she's oh, I don't think this is Jesus. I think I've gone completely insane. And Jesus is maybe, but what would be the difference?
James Wan is supposedly producing this Tommyknockers remake that hasn't happened yet. And I think it's in development hell, but honestly, I think a Tommyknockers adaptation, I just think there's so much you could do with it.
I would love to see it. I know that this person is canceled and rightly so, but I would have loved to see it from that director. Oh, what's his name? The guy who did Color Out of Space. Because the guy who's supposed to do Island of Dr. Monroe. But got yeah. What's his name?
I genuinely just gonna have to look it up. Let me see here.
Yeah.
Richard Stanley.
Richard Stanley. There you go. I would have loved to see him do it because if you haven't seen Color Out of Space, that's a perfect way to tell a Lovecraftian horror story in which the demons or the aliens or the otherworldliness becomes you, but you're still you. I mean, that is truly to me what is horrifying. And at the end of the day, kind of what they're saying is beautiful too. It's the idea of the divine spirit, you becoming it becoming you, the idea of transference. What do you guys call it? The transubstantiation? Is that the word?
Possibly.
It's the taking Christ into you and you becoming Christ. The idea of losing my identity has always been one of the scariest things. I never wanted to join a group in school. I always wanted to be by myself. And when my mom would ask me, I'd go because I don't want to be lost in someone else's personality. I didn't like the idea of a cult of personality or popular people, or I didn't want to be part of a group. I thought I might lose part of myself there. And so the idea of becoming one with anything is kind of to me a horrifying idea, but I can also see how it's a beautiful idea because at the end of the day, you don't want to die alone. And we're always told that's how we die. Everyone dies alone. Even if you're surrounded by people, you have to go through the process alone and no one knows what's on the other side. And what this show posits in a very kind way is that it is literally even the act of dying, not just death, but the act of dying is returning to not being alone anymore. And that's just so beautiful. It is loneliness dispelled is what death is.
Yeah. The thing these characters have in common is unity in moments of death. And it's spoken visually in very effective ways. And
this whole town goes up in flames and chooses to, because they decide to burn up the town in the hopes of smoking out these two kids and end up just burning down the structures that they could have hidden in during the day. And they make their peace with it. They went, oh yeah, we really fucked up. Let's just walk into the sun and just sing some hymns and just go up. And it's horrifying. It's horrifying, but it's like scary and reminiscent of like, yeah, Jonestown or cults or something. But it's also quite beautiful because they are doing something that's very, in that moment, they're not thinking about themselves anymore. They're like, okay, like this is the end of our journey. They've made peace with it. And the only person that doesn't make their peace with it is Bev, who we last see scrambling into the sand, trying to hide from like the sunlight.
At least one of them could have buried themselves in the ground.
I mean, she's trying to.
Yeah, but the fact that it didn't occur to her at the last second. So I just have to say, like, and I know we want to get into some other topics too, but I have to pivot for a second to general, like, real life cult stuff. The reason I'm endlessly fascinated with like documentaries about this, fiction about this, is because it's all about people finding their tribe, right? You know, like for better or worse. And we see the worst results of this. You know, Jonestown is the most infamous. But more recently, for anyone who hasn't seen it, HBO's documentary about Heaven's Gate is a must-see, in my opinion. I think it's fascinating. It's 3 parts. It's 3 or 4 parts. It's quick.
Yeah, it's quick.
Yeah. But Heaven's Gate specifically was written off as such a punchline when it happened. And what I think is important is, you know, when this documentary delves into the insane ripple effect of the tragedy of this event. And like, you know, one of the more famous members was Nichelle Nichols' brother from Star Trek, was a member of Heaven's Gate who killed himself.
And the Heaven's Gate people, the specific thing that was sad and interesting about them were these were not religious people. Like, they didn't grow up religious. This was not like a religion-themed cult. This was specifically like science people. These were like a lot of scientists. And what they believed in was like this alien thing that was coming behind the Hale-Bopp comet. So it was like a lot of, Star Trek fans, like a lot of people who were able to do a lot of critical thinking in their life and who didn't approach this from a thing of like, oh, I'm just blindly following a faith of like something my parents handed down to me or the church did. They like forged their new own thing that was completely based off what they believed was like science truth. You know, it was not institutionalized in any way.
And when you get into a situation where you hone down your perspective to such a narrow point of view, it makes sense that you would get to the point where you do unequivocally believe that this is a simple transaction of events where you will die and you will end up in a spaceship or heaven or whatever, and you'll move on to the next phase. I think what Midnight Mass does so wonderfully is it identifies the good, all the good things that can come out of faith.
Yes,
and
it does. It really does.
Without writing off religion as a whole, which is so important to me, because I come from a family that I don't entirely agree with, but I love them and I respect their beliefs, and that's never going to change. And I feel like Flanagan is a kindred spirit in that way, and I really picked up on that with the show.
I mean, what I really appreciate about this was, like I said, Judaism isn't really concerned with, it doesn't really have you be concerned with the afterlife. Judaism is all about questioning, like, why are we doing this? Why is the Torah like this? Do we believe that? You know, you're supposed to interact with the text in a very questioning way. But the main takeaway is do the best you can with your time on earth and be the best person you can on earth, because you're not going to get another shot at this one way or another. Whatever is happening afterwards happens afterwards. But be the best person that you can right now. Like, because you're not going to be like a ghost or like anything like that. So like, do your best. And that's like comforting on some level, but on another level, like, it's always really scared me. The thing that always scares me is not being dead, because I was not alive at one point earlier, and that wasn't scary. You know, it's not being dead that scares me. It's not being dead that scares me. It's the moment of death or the moment of awareness that you are dying that is so completely terrifying. I have like panic attacks about it, like on a nightly basis of just, is this what it feels like to die? Is this what it feels like to die? Is this the beginning of the end? Like that sort of constant, like hyper. And what this show posits is like, what if that moment is not scary, but is beautiful and is surrounded by a feeling of immense togetherness? It's what Riley sees when he's burning up into flames, is he sees the woman who he hit and run over finally without any glass in her face or run over, she's suddenly restored to herself, and she's beautiful and young, and she holds her hand out to him, and he takes it. And in that moment, we cut right back to, and probably the scariest part of the show, Katie Siegel screaming because he is just in flames. Like, we just cut out to like him in the middle of
that.
Flames.
I'll be honest, Drew, like that episode, and I listened to the credits afterwards. I didn't let Netflix skip past it because I could tell what that the editor is like, and Flanagan had decided, no, we need the audio of the aftermath playing over the credits. Right. So I wanted to linger in that with the characters.
It's so intense, man.
And because, I'll sobbing. I was a fucking mess during that scene.
Yeah. Because you think that he's taken Katie Siegel out to the water to tell her the story of how he's become a vampire, to trap her, because now she's on the water with him. They're on the canoe. And she even brings it up afterwards. She goes, okay, so you say you're a vampire. I don't believe you, but let's say it is true. Why would you take me out to the water? Like, I don't believe you're a bad person. So what is this that you're doing? And he's like, well, no, I took you out on the water like this so I'd have no place to run, because like the sun's coming up, and he doesn't want to be able to go into his instincts and go hide and become like everyone else is becoming. He wants to go into the light and sort of, he can be a vampire and also resist the urges and be just like a good, decent person and like want to not be this thing. So he just chooses death, and he chooses to like, you know, to burn up in front of her so she understands the threat that she's dealing with, and she could maybe go away, like run away.
And I think this show nails it better and handles the nuance much more substantively. But that was one of my favorite things about 30 Days of Night was the end with Josh Hartnett and everything. Do you remember that movie?
Yes, I read the comic too. Okay. I never saw. You know what? I don't think I've ever seen the movie. I've definitely read the comic. The
comic is great. I love all the watercolor design, like illustration, and it's very effective. But the thing is, you should see the movie, but it has this, you know, similar moments of moral resolution in the wake of becoming the undead. And I think 30 Days of Night is a very underrated vampire movie. And I'll never shut up about it. But I think Midnight Mass took the best parts of that and just expanded upon it 1,000%.
I mean, I hate to be like, there is some parts here that are like straight, like lifted from Twilight almost, because the idea in Twilight, for anyone who didn't make it through the series or read the books, is that Bella's superpower, some of the vampires have superpowers, just FYI. Her superpower,
baseball's one of them.
Baseball's one of them. One of them's super strong. Like Edward Cullen can read minds. He's never been able to read her mind for some reason. And when she turns into a vampire, the first thing she wants to do is feed, but she like resists. She's like able to resist it. And then she's like, then they realize her power is self-control and like willpower. Like she's like the Green Lantern. She just harnesses her self-control and can project it into a physical bubble.
That's like Anne Hathaway getting the superpower of obedience in Ella Enchanted.
Yeah, it is. Except that like it does play into something very interesting here, because it's like, right, when they become vampires, somebody like the Riley and his father, we see exactly where he got it from. His father resists the urge to bite anybody. Like he tells his wife at the end, he's like, no, I wanted to, I just didn't, because I had like self-control and I resisted that urge, because you have to convince yourself that the urge is something divine to even do this horrifying act. You're just kind of, you're not mindlessly doing it, and that's the horror of it. You're justifying why you're doing it, why you're telling people.
And the thing is, frankly, the issue I have with Twilight is anything it taps into for me is incidental, because the whole series to me seems to be about a committee of werewolf and vampire dudes sitting around deciding what Bella's going to do with the rest of her life.
Well, it's extremely Mormon. I will say
I don't like that series at all, but
like it is telling that like the whole thing is about her not having, like, literally, it's not a metaphor. They're not allowed to have sex until they're vampire married. She can get vampire married at like a young age because her dad's like okay with it, and then they do have vampire married.
Stephanie Meyer writes sex like a Cronenberg film. Like
they have sex like a Cronenberg film, and then she gets pregnant, and the pregnancy lasts about 5 weeks because she immediately gets pregnant. The vampire baby is killing her, and so he finally The whole thing is crazy bananagrams, and the religious allegory here is just sort of like hold out until like you're 17 maybe, and then your 200-year-old boyfriend can get you pregnant real quick, and then you can be a vampire who has self-control, and you both live forever. And your baby, get this, your baby grows up really fast. It grows up to be like 16, 17, like in the space of like a year. And then you guys just stay the same age forever, along with your werewolf friend. Everyone stays the same age forever.
And I just don't believe that 100-year-old has that much in common with an 18-year-old. Even if
the thing is, he constantly talks about Shakespeare with her. That's the only thing they have in common is he's constantly bringing up Shakespeare.
Yeah, there's no way she realistically knows that much about Shakespeare. I'm sorry.
No. He's just quoting Romeo and Juliet a bunch, I believe. And that's their thing. It's very superficial. I guess in that way, I always did find it believable because high school love is very dramatic and superficial. But I agree, he should have known better. He's like 200 years old. But getting back to this story, I wonder. Sorry, I mean,
Twilight upsets me.
Yeah, I wonder if the people, and I've been playing this thought experiment for a while, like if these people, because they've been restored to their health, we haven't talked at all about the doctor in town who's also kind of a skeptic, whose mother is is dying of dementia. She's very old. She's like infirm, but she's very clearly played by a young actress. And
yeah,
she's doing an old woman voice, like in a high school play. And it's revealed at the end that woman, she's getting younger and younger. She and Hamish Linklater have had an affair, and the doctor is herself just the priest is her actual father. And it's played in this very beautiful way that hadn't been it only been hinted at once when the drunk guy was like, oh, I heard this guy had a kid. But like, who am I to judge? But like, you never got the sense that that's what was going on here. But It's not presented like he was a creepy priest. It was like he really loved her, and he said he would have thrown it all away for her, but she wouldn't accept it, you know?
Yeah, and I as soon as the series started, as soon as I saw Monsignor Pruitt and I saw her, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen with these two characters. Like,
really?
Yeah. But I like Alex Esso. She's played that character. She's the star of Starry Eyes, and she played Wendy Torrance, and she's such a good job of encapsulating Shelley Duvall without it doing cosplay. Like,
she is so distinct looking that I immediately recognized her, but then also at the same time misidentified her as Chelsea Peretti, or not Chelsea Peretti. The other chick from Haunting of Bly Manor and Haunting of Hill House, where I was like, look at the teeth. I know who that is. I know that actress, but I just was off by a little bit. I should have realized who it was, because it's the Starry Eyes woman. I mean, she's very distinct looking, and there's a way to even tell. The makeup is very well done. I would say the old person makeup, it's very subtle.
But I get what you mean about the old woman voice. I gave them a pass on that, but I noticed it.
As the old priest, before you know it's Hamish Linklater, I would go as far to say that's a guy wearing old man makeup, but it is entirely a different actor than Hamish Linklater.
He looks so much different, yeah.
He's a different skin color. He's got
the eyes, even the eyes. I was staring at the eyes because I was.
It's unclear why they made that choice to make it make it like that instead of just I don't know, getting another actor like they did in Hill House to play the dad.
Now here's the thing, and again, I don't want to get too nitpicky, but
no.
It reminded me of when I watched Old. I was like, okay, so certain people will reverse their age, but other people just stay the same. I want to know what the rules are. I think
they say you revert to your peak years of health. So it's
when you're most healthy. They establish that through dialogue.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so even though the doctor explains why the woman's no longer pregnant and says it's because the virus attacked, or the vampire thing attacked the baby and made it so it never happened, I actually assumed that it was because, and I'm not saying I'm right and the show is wrong, I assumed it was because it was reverting her body to a younger self so that it undid the pregnancy. So she was never pregnant in the first place.
Okay. This is why I'm glad we're discussing this, because there are certain things I just needed to have a conversation to just.
So that's why the kids don't age up, because they have not yet reached their full potential. So they have not yet hit the years that they would be.
Yeah, I wasn't the younger characters I didn't question as much, but I noticed even Riley's parents, Henry Thomas.
Oh yeah, that's the first people to change is she doesn't need her glasses immediately.
Yeah, because they're not that much older than the person playing their son. So I'm like, okay, so they're gonna age in reverse too. But even
you think so? Because I was like, they didn't do. I assumed they were kind of essentially the same age as the characters are playing. They're just like less healthy. Like Henry Thomas is
Henry Thomas is not that old. I think he's in his 50s.
And like that kid from Friday Night Lights is like what, in his like 30s? I think that's like plausible for a small New England.
It's plausible. But I even when, because like I can pick up on these things and kind of see where they're headed, I don't mind being able to figure out certain parts of the plot because there's so much that surprised me. Look, I don't want to be abrupt, but I also know that you're on a midnight mass tear this weekend, and you're going to keep talking about it tomorrow.
Yes, we're having Koi Chandru stop by Live in the Dark and talk about it. Yeah, I can talk about it forever, though. I mean,
absolutely, absolutely. Would you give me like a 30 to 60-second pass? Let me go grab a drink real quick. Yeah, I'll be right back.
Let me switch gears, whatever.
Yes, I will be right back, Drew. If you want to get into why you are the way you are, as Dusty would say in Twister, or Bill Paxton would say about Philip Seymour Hoffman in Twister.
That sounds good to me. Here is my middle school diary, guys. I found it. I specifically found it because Adam posted this thing that he wrote, I guess, like in 5th grade or 6th grade. And it's like the most on point, hilarious short story that I'd ever read. And I got like kind of obsessed with it. And I was like, well, what did I write in 5th or 6th grade? I remember that I had this journal here. And while it is not self-aware funny the way Adam was actually writing a hilarious like comedic short story, this diary is fucking hilarious. So I thought maybe we would take turns swapping off like stories or things that we wrote as younger people as a like fun little way to end out the night. Hey, it's all good. Vampires, 9/11s perfectly goes 1-to-1. I can totally see why that person's on our channel. So one thing that you should know about me, and I'll reiterate this for Adam, is, well, I guess a couple things you should know is when I wrote this, let's see if you can see it. This book belongs to Sarah Grant because that's my name. My first name is Sarah. It says, don't read. I only have one rule for reading this book. Don't. And it says, this goes double for Lauren and Marielle, which are the name of my friends. The preceding diary is then written entirely for an audience. Like this was meant to be read. This is 100% like a performative diary writing. And it is obsessed with the idea that people are reading the diary. So I think that's just like a very funny concept that you should know going into it. Other things you should know is I just discovered Star Wars and I was really into it, but like for all the wrong reasons. And I'm really, really boy crazy. I'm like insanely boy crazy in this. This is like upsettingly focused on boys in my middle school. There's even, if you've watched SEN lately, you might have heard a short story that I told about a time that I didn't get a compliment from a boy I liked, and I knocked his teeth out when he went down to get a drink from the water fountain. I just bashed his head in and knocked his 2 front adult teeth out, I believe. Well, I always thought that was just like an act of, just reacting. That was just an impulse. In this diary that is, as Eric said, might not be something we want to read out loud because it is premeditative. I literally say, Matt doesn't like me anymore. I hope he has a good dentist. So, yeah.
I hope he has a good dentist too. I really do. I was paying attention. Thank you for letting me get situated. And I had to go grab a couple of my childhood books as well.
Okay, Adam, I'm so into this. Can I have you do or can I do a reading of what I read your short story to be in the voice of that you posted on Twitter?
Yeah, why don't you read page 1?
Okay.
I'll read the second page that you've been waiting to hear about.
Oh my God, I'm so obsessed with this. This was like, I know we both love Craig Cole, Adam. This was like on a level of like, you can literally, there's just a 1-to-1 here. You just send that into ClickHole and it's like a perfect piece. It is a perfect piece. The way that you hit certain beats is like an adult level understanding of comedy.
and that was, you know, accidental in a lot of ways, but like I can tell you that when I turned 11, it's just like something clicked back then. Like, I don't know, my writing was not it's still very much the writing of a young person, but I look back on it, I'm like, man, I feel like I understood things better.
I almost feel like I feel a little bit bad reading this and then reading my stuff, because you would think that I was such a weird kid, that I had so many strange and Drew like thoughts, but like this is Sarah's journal, and it is mundane. It's funny, like, and it's hilariously obsessed with itself, and it is performative, but it is so goddamn mundane. It's like, I'm fat, I'm boring, it's so mundane shit, and this is like high level art. Okay, so guys, I'm gonna read this short story that Adam wrote when he was in 5th grade. Does it have a title?
Yeah. So, when I was in the 5th grade, I learned the word playwright. So I learned like PLAYWRIGHT, playwright. But I decided to deconstruct the term, and I refer to to Shakespeare in the story as a playwright, but the story itself, and it got water on it many years ago, a playwriter's plunder by Adam Collins, written in my 11-year-old handwriting.
But also, that's so clever. God damn it. Okay. I'm just going to read the story here. Okay. Starts out, hello, my name is William Shakespeare, and even though I'm dead, I'd like to tell you the story of my story of drama. It starts off very far away in a galaxy of drama, a place you've probably never been. Anyway, I was 5 years old arguing with my father, Maximilian. This was boring, and he wanted me to be a banana farmer. Boring. Did he care about what I wanted to do? Huh? I was working on my soon-to-be masterpiece, Hamlet. I wasn't long before I grew up, and my father ate so many bananas that he died of spontaneous combustion. I missed him, but also I kissed banana farming goodbye. My mom was still alive, though. She lived in the intergalactic nursing home for deadbeats who are afraid of sidewalks. I, on the other hand, was going to college to train to be a playwright. After I got out of college, I went with my friends Flavius and Crackerjack to the intergalactic arcade. We stayed there until 1 a.m., closing time. When I was 34 years old, I started putting on plays such as Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, and best of all, Hamlet. The cash was rolling in for that one, baby. That's where I lost it. Well, anyway, I was on the road to great success. I was casting my 5th cast for Hamlet.
It was a successful show.
Oh, the guy who made Hamlet was Bernardo Lapucci. He was a playwright as well. His understudy was Seward Lenapo. Little did I know that Mr. Lenapo was going to take the lead. On opening night, Bernardo and I began to argue. I won the argument. It was about who wrote better plays. After the argument, Bernardo acted like a spud and took off. But before that, he said, "You'll be sorry someday, Billy Boyd." I just ignored him. The show went well. Seward was swell. 5 years later was the anniversary of my great success of 1594. It was now 1599. Great with the math there. I know you guys, and then that's all I have. That's all I have. My God, the fucking Hamlet.
That was a great primer. And just to offer a little bit of context, we were tasked in the 5th grade with writing a short story that was based on an historical figure, essentially. And I've always been a big Star Wars fan. Yeah. So I decided to write a Shakespeare story in the vein of Star Wars and Spaceballs, essentially. And that's kind of where this is headed.
I also see a little bit of Hitchhiker's Guide in there, like maybe a little bit of Hitchhiker's Guide, the intergalactic arcade stuff. But just the beat about Hamlet, like just the way you hit that beat, and then you're like, the cash is rolling in on that one, baby. Like, holy God, that's so funny. That's so funny on purpose, and not funny accidentally like my stuff is.
I mean, honestly, at the time, I think I just was thinking of Hamlet as this popular cultural drama that had been adapted so many times in film. So I was just like, I was looking at it in dollars and cents. And I also grew up as a big fan of Last Action Hero.
Gotcha.
And that bit where Schwarzenegger plays Hamlet is one of my favorite gags. And I just watch that YouTube video all the time. So.
I love Last Action Hero. That's one of my favorite subgenres of movies, of people finding out the screen is malleable. It's favorite subgenre of movie.
Great double feature with Buster Keaton, Sherlock Jr.
And stay tuned. And Purple Rose of Cairo.
Yes.
So I want to hear the second half of this story, Adam. You got to let us know.
All right. So page 1 kind of gave you an idea of what this version of Shakespeare was doing. He's trying to find his footing in the galaxy. Bernardo Lapucci is a rival playwright who disagreed with his approach to Hamlet. And so he's parted ways. And in the wake of Hamlet's success, Shakespeare is riding his ship through the galaxy, enjoying himself.
Oh, yeah, right. He's in space.
Yep. All of this is happening in outer space. Just to remind all of you, it's all in outer space.
Including the banana plantation.
Yes. Yeah. a lot of banana farming in space. So I'm not going to read the entirety of the story. Okay, I figure we could do this in installments, and if people are into it, we'll give them a little bit more every week. But I'll read one more page. Great. I'll read one more page because I don't want to overplay my hand here. I want to leave the people wanting more. All right. Mm-hmm. All right. So 5 years later, it was the anniversary of my great success of 1594. It was 1599. I know you guys are smart enough to figure that out. I was going to hire the original cast of 1594's Hamlet. After a few rehearsals, we would perform Hamlet on stage on the precious drama-filled planet, Japanio. My destiny was on its way. I'm going to try to get this out. You're a great audience. I said,
oh my God.
My destiny was on its way. We were on our way to Japanio when something hit the top of my ship, the Shaky Speary 13. I told Seward to check outside. Ow! I heard poor Seward fall on his rear end. Oh, I ran back where he had fallen. There was a script lying on his belly. Oh, on it was a message written in black ink. It said, "You'll be sorry" on it. At that moment, I knew who it was from. Bernardo. That scum. If he bugged me at all, I was going to get vicious. Well, of course, he bugged and butted in. I wasn't at all surprised. We were only 65 million miles away from Japanio. My dream was so close. I had to get back there, but how? There were 44 people on this ship. That's a lot of people. I was sure we could take Bernardo. That was until more scripts hit the windshield. I saw at least 50 ships twice the size of ours. They were all shooting scripts at us. Oh now I knew that the cast and crew were dead meat unless I did something. Then I knew what to do. I ran back into the passengers section. Everyone back there was chattering and screaming and everything. Listen up, I yelled. There are eight escape pods in the back. I want as many people as possible to squeeze into the escape pods. What will you do with the remaining passengers? Octavius asked. There was no Octavius until now.
No, there's no. That must have been an edit.
They'll stay with me until we get close to Bernardo's ship. There I will drop off and take care of Bernardo and all of his agents. I'm staying with you, Brutus, the stage manager said. Okay, so am I. Yeah. And then, so am I, another person called out. The people who stay with me are going to help me get Bernardo's ship. Then I want them to take the ship and meet with the others who are in the escape pods on Japanio. This is what we call exposition, VideoDrew.
This is I was writing in the comments, this is fucking amazing. This is like Hamlet 2. Have you, that Steve Coogan movie?
Yeah, I enjoy Hamlet too. What about you? Brutus asked. Hopefully I'll make it and meet you in Japanio on one of Bernardo's ships. If I don't make it in time, I want you to start the show anyway. Everybody got that? I asked. Yeah, they all muttered. One by one, they all started fitting into the escape pods. I'm going to leave you there.
I gotta be honest. I feel like while listening to this, my eyes started flashing like one of the vampires in Midnight Mass.
Just
yeah, my eyes are starting to water from like laughing so hard that literally they're starting to flash like a weird light. That is so fucking hilarious, Adam, because it takes the concept of like Shakespeare, right? This thespian. It's like that thing that you do in high school where it's like, let's do Shakespeare, but set it in space. But like you're just taking the guy Shakespeare and setting him in outer space where he's going on so many more adventures than like actual Shakespeare ever did. And like, did you know about Christopher Marlowe when you wrote the story? Like, did you know Shakespeare had like a contemporary rival who?
Not in any depth. Not in any depth. I didn't understand the history behind it at the time, but I wanted to treat Shakespeare like a character. And honestly, part of my influence was the classic Nickelodeon cartoon Doug. I love Doug as well. And one of my favorite recurring bits is his older sister, Judy, was really into drama and theater and Shakespeare. And she had a literal marble bust of Shakespeare in her bedroom. And and I remember one time Doug is daydreaming and he daydreams about Shakespeare attacking a city like Godzilla, like a giant Shakespeare just attacking the city. I'm like, that's awesome. And I just wanted to write a crazy Shakespeare story of my own. So I just blended it with Star Wars and stuff. And I won't read it tonight, but just a teaser. You see this right here with this beautiful fabric covering of exotic birds. So this is a book I wrote. So the theme in 5th grade is, here's an historical figure. Here's an endangered species. Write a creative story about it.
And get your notebook.
Yeah. So I was given, for my endangered species, I was given the rare South American bird, the Quetzal. Quetzal. And it's called The Second to Last Quetzal by Adam Collins, illustrated by Adam Collins. Those are 2 separate lines. Very important. And the thing that's so adorable is my elementary school even like manufactured little emblem stickers to put in your book to make it look official.
It's like this classic thing. I love it.
Yeah.
Hamstrack is saying read it. You know what? How about this? If you guys donate, I keep forgetting to say this, streamlabs.com/VideoDrew. We raise like, let's see if we get $20 here. Maybe Adam will read another part of his thing tonight. Maybe.
I'll give you this. This is a little, so back then I was a much better illustrator and artist than I'll ever be again. And so I drew this picture of a Quetzal drinking out of a crazy straw with bell-bottom pants and a cool belt.
Is that like literally a Futurama thing?
And I wrote this poem about him.
What does it say?
Quincy Quetzal quivered quickly, quietly, and quite nicely on his way to Quebec to quiver while drinking a quick, quiet Quebec quick drink.
Wow. A quick, quiet Quebec quick drink.
And this entire book ends up becoming a backdoor sequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Well, that makes sense because Willy Wonka ended up in space in a elevator, right?
Yes. Well, it's actually a distant sequel to the Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator in a way, because it's like after all of that, it's about like when Charlie is grown up and washed up.
Wait, that is also very funny. I feel like I heard something about that recently. Are you asking like are you saying this kind of animal, like this thing, the quizzy?
Is that a Quetzalcoatl? Well, Quetzalcoatl is like the South American, like, or the Mayan or Aztec god of something.
Yeah,
that I can't elaborate on. But like, yeah, that's in the vein. But like the literal bird was a very rare bird. I don't know if it's extinct now.
This is a bird, because this is part of this MetaZoo game I'm obsessed with. It's about crypto. It's like about cryptids. So it's like all different kinds of cryptids. There's Mothman. There's a bunch of different stuff. But this guy, Quizalogic. I'm not gonna try to say it. It is said that this cryptid is king of the Thunderbirds and was old when the first Thunderbird hatched. It is known to feed on them regularly, and you get extra points for every damage. You get 10 points damage for every light bulb directly above where you're playing. That's why I like this game. It has a lot of conditional arrangements. Adam, I'm so glad we didn't go to school together growing up, because if we had, I would have been like unhealthily obsessed with you because of this. Because as I understood it, I was a very interesting kid. But as I'm reading again, I'm not sure how much you heard, what I very performatively wrote as a diary entry, I was not that interesting. I was actually super basic, super boring, and just the only interesting about me was how hard I went on certain stuff. So I'm going to read you a little bit about my first experience seeing Star Wars.
Oh, I want this.
I've seen Star Wars recently, the new trilogy. I didn't mean the new trilogy. I meant literally the only trilogy that existed, the first one. They just had a re-edit of it that came out. I would love to be Princess Leia. She's so cool. She's a strong, witty character, but still needs a rescuer. She's not all brain, no brawn, and vice versa. I wish it could be that way with crossed out 4 different names. Eventually, in totally different ink, wrote Sean and me. I mean, Princess Leia and Han's Solo fought. She was even in love with Luke, which is very perverted because she likes him in that way. And they're brother and sister. Sometimes I wish I was Han's Solo. I'm not gay or bi. I just think he's cool. He's self-dependent, conceited, but he has a good heart. Sometimes I think I'm like that. If I had to cast people in Star Wars, I would be this. And then I give a list of all my friends. Then I say, I hate horror movies. I get so excited and I think they're cool during the day. But at night, I lie awake. I'm mostly afraid something's in my room. But since I saw Friday the 13th, I'm afraid of falling asleep because I misidentified Nightmare on Elm Street. Then I want to cut to a couple episodes later of this. Yeah, they were in episodic form. Well, back to my new favorite, Star Wars. My obsession is starting to freak me out. I even watched the entire movie The Fugitive today just to see Harrison Ford. It's really, really depressing. And then I started writing about the Star Wars continuum. Then I say, I'm doing, then I say, I went to see Return of the Jedi. I'm at an all-time low. Now someone just has to mention the first letter of anything that has to do with Star Wars, and my ears perk up. Needless to say, I'm doing very well in school because I'm so attentive. I wonder if anyone will ever read this journal. This could become the second Anne Frank diary.
Oh.
Whoa, that's a heavy thought.
But hey, she's, you're both Jewish. It's fair game.
Yeah, I say, whoa, that's a heavy thought. Then I said, geez, I hope I'm dead by then. Then I would be super embarrassed for people to know who I used to like. Almost done here. Because again, I'm skipping through it.
Was it Han Solo? Were you crushing on him?
No, it was like all these different boys that I'm putting into like the Han Solo role. Then I have this thing. I want to find this one last thing because it ties in perfectly to this. Right, here we go. I just want to see The Empire Strikes Back today. I'm now so fully in love with Han Solo. Not enough to learn his name. I'm thinking about hunting down Billy D. Williams and killing him. Why? I think that there's 2 related thoughts. I'm so now fully in love with Han Solo that I'm thinking about hunting down actor Billy D. Williams and killing him. Princess Leia and Han's first kiss was so romantic. I'm now a full-fledged Star Wars fan, and whenever the name comes up in conversation, I scream with joy. I usually do that last part in my head. I'm so angry at my mom. I was this close to being named Leah when I was born, but no, my mom just had to name me Sarah. Actually, Sarah is a pretty cool name. I would like my middle name to change. I hate my middle name, Drew. It's really boyish, and every time somebody asks me my middle name, I have to tell them, and they give me this look like, Drew, what the hell were your parents thinking? She's a girl for crying out loud. Also, if my middle name was Leia, then my name would be changed to Sarah Leia Grant. That roughly translates into Princess Leia Grant because Sarah means princess in Hebrew. Now I just have to find a way to change my last name to Alderaan. Because I thought that's what her last name was.
There you go.
I think I'm becoming obsessed, so I'll stop now. And I think Josh has a crush on me.
Josh.
So that's just a little taste of the shit I was into. It's so obsessed. It's like misery level obsessive, but not like anything other than surface level. Like not dissecting any of it. It's just, here's the scene. Here's what I like. Here's the character I'm Mary Suing. I'm going to go hunt down and murder Billy T. Williams now.
Yeah, and I think your younger counterpart was picking up on all the romantic undertones between Han and Lando that we've all picked up on for years. You were just jealous of Billy D, so you wanted to kill him. I get it.
I wonder if I just couldn't remember his name was Lando, but remembered the actor's name was Billy D. Williams, and so put it down that way. But no,
you remembered the harder part?
Yeah. I would say the intention there is very much like, I'm so in love with this character. Like, I'm able to differentiate between Harrison Ford and the character. I'm so in love with this character, I'm going to go hunt down the actor who plays the guy who betrays him in the movie and kill him. And I'm writing this.
There's that too, the whole betrayal. But I was I was shipping them. Sorry.
Well, you know what's so scary though is, again, in this book I say I hope this kid has a good dentist, and it is the kid who I would then go on to bash his front teeth out in front, like in a water fountain. So there's premeditation violence in this book that I'd have no memory of ever like thinking about before it actually happened. So I'm so lucky that whatever prevented me from going after Billy D. Williams and hunting him down as like a crazy ass 12-year-old is that just something prevented me from being able to function that at that high of a level.
You know,
I'll always be grateful.
I'm gonna thank Josh. I think he did it.
There's so many people in here. There's so many guys. These poor boys. Is this like a list of people who just dodged the bullet? Is what this is.
Well, I think a lot of us could go back to our diaries and stories of old and really extract some pretty meaningful stuff. I mean, like, it's easy to laugh at these things, but like I'm gonna try and dig up this story I wrote in the 3rd grade. That it's basically about Oliver Twist fighting all of the food mascots. So like,
oh my god, that's awesome.
So like the big villain is Hungry Jack, and his second in command is the Quaker Oatmeal Man. And yeah, it's something. But I just want to show you one more illustration, if you don't mind. So that even though Quincy the Quetzal was in my poem, Jeremy is the actual protagonist of my story, and that's him lounging in his house, watching television.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is it difficult to be so good at art at such a young age?
It's difficult to not be able to do that anymore. And I mean, look at myself from like 24 years ago and be like, wow, you could actually draw.
That's it's so good. I mean, my stuff is I had very poor because of a bunch of different things, but mostly a combination of ADHD, something called obstinance defiance disorder, which I talked about on SDN, not being a real, I mean, it is a DSM classification, but it really is just a marker for kids you have to put an eye on in case they turn out to be sociopaths later on. Diagnosed with that from an early age. And that combined with like autoimmune thing that makes my joints all wiggly means that like I could not draw, I could not stay in the lines, and I got very angry at people who try to tell me that like I needed to draw better or like draw straighter or draw coherently, because everything I write is literally almost indecipherable to anyone that's not me.
The world wasn't ready for you, Drew.
The world was not ready for me, but maybe when I become a vampire, it will be.
Yeah. And to bring it all home, I'd love to read what's his face, Father Paul, Hamish Linklater's stories from the 5th grade. I bet they'd be fascinating.
God,
as well.
We didn't really talk about, but God, give that man an Emmy. Give him like everything.
I hope he gets nominated, and I'm confident we're going to see him in a lot more stuff going forward.
And I'm so glad he's finally broken out of that role that he usually plays, like the suit, like sort of the sinister suit and stuff. Like, I'm so glad that he's finally been given like a breath and a range to like perform as well as I know he can. Adam, this has been such an enlightening and fun episode. Where can people find you?
My handle's right there at Eisenthor on Twitter and Letterboxd primarily. You can see me here bi-weekly. Why are we like this? VideoDrew, may I tease the topic I want to talk about for 2 weeks from now?
So excited for this.
2 weeks from now on October 16th, my topic of choice is the Blair Witch franchise. And specifically, I'm going to be rewatching the trilogy. I do consider it a trilogy. I love weird trilogies like the Blair Witch movies because all 3 films are so different in unique ways. And then the thing I love about the Blair Witch franchise is all the expanded material, books, video games, including the most recent video game, which I'll be playing leading up to our episode.
Oh, yeah, me too. Me too. It's a very early ARG. Like, that was like one of the earliest ARGs, I feel like, was the Blair Witch.
Yeah, and I played a lot of the games on PC. So in any case, I just that's going to be a fun episode. So tune in with that. And then not every Sunday, but a lot of Sundays, I do the bracket show on the Finally Tailored Network with Jacob and Taylor and the gang. And it's myself, Marisol, Mara, occasionally Dan, Jesse Swift, and his wife Lauren. It's a lot of fun. And we basically dissect geek films and debate which ones are the best in a giant tournament. So that's fun. But next week I have 2 matches airing as well. Teams Deception versus Chaos Theory, and myself in singles against Brendan Meyer. It's going to be good stuff. Check it out. That's all I got.
As for me, you're either watching on my channel, in which case please like and subscribe and leave a comment, as long as you don't have a thing about 9/11. If so, just keep it to yourself. Or
good old bots.
Good old bots. I mean, one of them had like an interesting way of phrasing it, which is I'll talk about it off camera. But
I think it was Bev Keen from Midnight Mass in the chat.
It was Bev Keen. You're right. That's exactly the comment I was thinking of. Although I think the argument was like the opposite. And you can find me over also at Content Candy. If you listen to podcasts anywhere, we're really trying to build this up. It has exclusive audio only podcasts like me and Lon Harris's Garmin Shows Ya, as well as me and NerdChronic. We do the Video Chronicles. We do our new review show. We start off with Midnight Mass, but I think we're gonna probably do this Squid Game next because that's really good. We still have to do Malignant. We're getting around to it, folks. But basically, any of the shows here, you can probably find most of them over on podcast form. The stuff like Cinema Bias. Tomorrow night, we're having Coy Chandru on Live in the Dark with VideoDrew to discuss more Midnight Mass. Because honestly, I feel like I could talk about the show forever. But also,
I can't imagine his happy ass sitting through all of that show. But I can't wait to hear what he has to say about it.
I think it's because it's positive. I think because at the end of the day, this is a kind show, and Coy responds to kindness. So I think that's maybe it. But you're right. I had the same feeling of like, how did he sit through this? I was like, maybe it's because he's from Boston. He grew up around Catholics. I don't know. Maybe that's it. We'll find out tomorrow.
I'll be watching.
Tune in tomorrow at 8 p.m. because we'll be doing it right then. Also, if you have Roku or if you have Peacock, check out the Rotten Tomatoes channel because I do a show called RT Essentials over there. That's usually hosted by Mark Ellis. I write for it, so check those out. And that's all I have for right now. Oh, yeah, Patreon. My patrons, patreon.com/VideoDrew. Every donation helps. You get fun access to stuff, and it's a good source of life supply right now. Much like blood or communion wine, it is keeping me going. Adam, this has been an amazing episode. Love talking to you. Love reading these stories with you.
Well. More where that came from. We'll gradually reveal more week to week.
Yes. Every episode will be more, just like Midnight Mass. Okay, guys. Good night. Bye.
Good night.